Hello Bannerlords. Today, we battle an opponent with 255 soldiers with just 191 of our own. The Aserai General Guide is a new series of videos where I will enforce a few additional restrictions upon myself. The limits include the troops that I can use and the weapons and armor I can equip. The first task at hand is to find a good spot to place the ground units. It should be somewhere the ground units can fire from without many obstructions. Since there wasn't high ground available nearby, I focused on organizing the troops before the enemy got close enough to engage. I could see the enemy mounted ranged units heading my way from a distance. I moved the mounted units to the side and waited for the right time to engage. The best time to do this is when the enemy mounted troops is within firing range of the ground ranged units. Order the mounted units to charge to increase their lethality, but be sure to cancel the order before the troops get too close to the enemy's main force. As the opponent's main force came into view, I ordered the mounted units to move away. Enemy ground ranged units can deal heavy damage if you're not careful. The best play is to get rid of most of the opponent's mounted units before their ground units engage. Look for opportunities to flank the opponent's main force while you do. I positioned the mounted ranged units to be within range to fire at the enemy, and commanded the mounted melee units to charge. Since the opponent also had many mounted units, I gave the green light to use javelins. I usually prefer to save it for use against the enemy ground melee units. The enemy mounted units are a significant threat against my ground ranged units, which I need to counter their massive ground force. Here I noticed the enemy archers were exposed and facing in the opposite direction. Take this opportunity to kill some of them with the mounted units. Pay attention to how they react. You will need to back away before they start firing. As I still had a large force of mounted units with ammunition, I decided to delay the engagement with the foot soldiers. I commanded the ground melee and ranged units to fall back. With my ground force now out of reach, the enemy ranged units redirected their focus to the mounted units, forcing me to reposition them further away. Let us review what happened from the top down. At the start of the battle, I used the mounted units to kill as many enemy mounted ranged units as possible. I positioned the mounted units towards the enemy's flank as they got closer to the enemy's main force. I then tried to eliminate as many enemy mounted melee units as possible as the enemy troops continued to move across the map. They left their archers exposed as they did, and I took the opportunity to charge through them with the mounted melee units. The enemy's ground force was now about to come into contact with mine. I ordered mine to back away, while the mounted ranged units continued to wither theirs down. The opponent then redirected their troops' focus to my mounted units, forcing me to reposition them. Now that the mounted units are far away, the opponent redirected their focus back onto the ground units. Their advancement was slow as they had to rely on the shield wall formation to defend against the continuous barrage of arrows. Seeing another opportunity, I commanded the mounted melee units to push through the opponent's backline. Once again, pay attention to the troops' reaction when you move in. Enemy archers can kill you quickly. Despite having the upper hand, the opponent's ground force is still large enough to be a threat. I needed to bring down their numbers before running out of arrows against their shield wall. I decided to split the formation of ground ranged units into two to counter the infantry units pushing in with the shield wall formation. Since the enemy ground melee units could only block arrows from one direction, two smaller groups of ground ranged units will eventually eliminate them. Now that most of the enemy's forces had already been destroyed, I commanded the mounted melee units to charge to finish what remained.
Archers, move! Look that way! Omen, move face that! Infantry! Infantry!
Let us take a look at what happened from the top down again. As the opponent's main force closed in, I commanded the mounted melee units to attack the enemy ranged units. I then separated the formation of ground ranged units into two to counter the enemy ground melee units pushing in with a shield wall formation. Lastly, I got the infantry units to charge in to finish off the enemy troops that remain.
Soldiers, charge! Cavalry, hold orders!
I hope that you enjoyed this video. Do let me know what you think about this series in the making and if you have any questions. I will be using Twitter to gather community input concerning upcoming videos. Do join me there to be part of this journey of mine. As always, do click the like and subscribe button if you would like to support what I do.